Welcome to Code.py. So in this series of videos, I am covering coding interview related questions that I have encountered during the actual interview sessions from the topics ranging from recursion, lists, arrays, etc. So I'll be covering very basic problems as well as some of the complex problems that I have encountered, and I'll try to share solutions to those problems that work for me. The solutions that I've shared, I don't claim those solutions to be the only way to solve the problems, nor do I claim that these are the only set of problems related to those particular areas that anyone could encounter. The whole point of doing this exercise is to basically help others who are looking to prepare for coding interviews. In case they encounter similar scenarios, they'll be able to get some idea from these solutions. Please feel free to share your suggestions, and in case you have any better or efficient solution that can work, I'll be more than happy to understand that as well. So you can use the comment section to share the details. In this particular video, we'll be writing a Python code to recursively find the sum of numbers for a given range. So we'll take one particular integer, positive integer, as an input, which will be the range, and we will find the sum of all the numbers to that range. Fairly simple, but let's see what is one of the correct ways to solve this problem. So let's get started with the coding part. Okay, so if you see here on my screen, as always for recursion, there are three important things that we have to consider. First is the actual recursive case, which is the equation which indicates how the recursion will work. So in our case, in this case, it will be the recursive sum is equal to up to a range n is equal to n plus recursive sum up to a range of n minus 1. The base case here is that recursive sum for n equal to 0 is 0, and the edge cases or constraints that we have is the number should be positive and basically an integer, and it should be positive when for the range. And we'll have to make sure our solution appropriately handles the scenarios which are supposed to be not which are supposed to be causing issues, for example passing a negative number or passing a decimal number. So let's get started with the code. So the first thing is we'll write the actual recursive function. So recursive sum, okay, sorry about that, recursive sum, let's say so like our recursive case as we have written above, basically let's write that. So return n plus recursive sum for n minus 1. So essentially this function is this is at the core, this is how the function should ideally work, but like we have to since we have to add our base case as well as we have to also make sure that it works only, it basically checks for a positive integer. So we will be adding those details later on, but to test this function, let's create a main block. So if name is equal to main, okay, and let's take the range or the input value of n as the range value, range basically from the user as input. So enter the range, enter the range up to which the sum should be calculated. Okay, so this is what is the input, and once we have the range, then we can call this recursive sum function. So and we can basically try to print the output of this recursive sum function. So for that range, and also before that, now so the thing is, because we are taking the input from this input function, by default the input will be a string. So let's convert that string into an integer, int of n. So I'm overriding that value of input that we have received as an integer, and then our function should work. So if okay, at this point of time, if I'll execute this function, let's try to execute and see what happens. So let's say I enter the value as 3. You can see we are getting a maximum recursion depth. That's because in our recursive function we don't have the base case or the case that will terminate the recursion. So let's add that. So if n is equal to 0, So basically when n value of n becomes 0, we will return 0, okay, else in all the other cases we will continue returning the value we were returning. So this should handle this recursion problem or the maximum recursion depth error that we are getting. Let's try to execute it again. So this time if I pass the number as 3, I'm getting the sum as 6, which is 1 plus 2 plus 3, of course, which is 6. So in a nutshell, this is how the function should work. But like I mentioned, we also have to check that the number that we are considering for the range should be a positive integer. So for that, let's create another function just to check whether the number is an integer or not. So definition is int for a number to be passed. So let's use a try and exception block. So in the try block we will try to cast this. So int n, if this will be an integer, then this cast will work as expected. Otherwise basically it will raise an exception and we will move to the except block. So the moment we are going to accept, we already know that this is not an integer, so we will return false. And in case the conversion is fine, that automatically implies that it's a valid integer, so we will return true. Okay, so this is the check function that we will add. And now let's put this check function here. So if is int, basically we are checking that the number or the value of the range that we have received is a valid integer. Only if it is a valid integer we basically can cast it and then we print it, print the output. Else we have to pass an appropriate message to the end user. So please enter a valid positive integer. Okay, so this is how now with this changed code, let's try to run it again. So this time if we pass the value of let's say, so we have already considered that the value should be in integer. So let's say if I'm passing the value of a decimal value 1.5, so it will give us the appropriate message, please enter a valid positive integer, and it will not process. For all the other cases where we are passing the valid integer, it will work fine. But still there is one more use case where, let's say, if we are passing a negative number, we are still getting the maximum recursion depth because it's not checking for the number to be negative. So for that, let's try to modify this same function to check for integer as well as a positive integer, or the number being negative as an optional parameter. So let's say is positive, I'll pass another parameter, and by default we'll keep it as false. So basically this flag will be used to check whether we want to not only check the number which has been input as an integer, but also to check that the number is a positive integer. Okay, so let's use this flag is positive. So in the same try block, once we have identified that yes, it's an integer, let's check this flag if is positive. So that means the flag is activated or the flag is true, for which indicates we need to check for the number to be positive. So let's say n greater than 0. This is our check for the number to be positive. If it is positive, we will return true. Else we will return false. And of course, if this flag is not set up, that it means we don't need to check, or the user is not, or basically for our code we don't want to check the number to be a positive integer, and just an integer is enough for us. So return true in that case, and then the other piece of the code remains the same. So okay, now with this change added, let's call this isn't function with is pose value set up as true. That means we want to check that the number is not only an integer but a positive integer. And now if I run this and if I pass a negative value, we will get an appropriate message that you have to enter, please enter a valid positive integer. So that's about it for this particular function and this particular code. It is a fairly simple problem, but I just wanted to share the way I worked out this problem, and along with the checks and along with covering the recursive case, the base case as well as the edge cases. So I hope this is useful. If in case you have any suggestions, please feel free to share those in the comment section. If you like the video, kindly subscribe and share, and I'll be back with similar videos very soon. Thanks a lot for watching, and you have a great day. Thank you.